fabulous attendees. Sorry for the confusion, I'm actually behind you. We're just gonna go through some announcements really quick, and then we can get to the good stuff. So, a couple changes in our schedule. Today, the Conversation with Jennifer Salk panel has moved to the Victorian balcony at 2:45, which is now, so if you wanna go over there, it's happening. And the Conversation with Michael McCullers is also at 2:45 in the St. David's Bethel Hall, but I think that you guys made a great choice by coming to this panel. Please note that there have been a few other slight schedule changes to the conference program. Please remember the website always has an accurate schedule, and to check your morning dailies for updates. If you had the following panels on your schedule for tomorrow, please check online for the most accurate times and location. Those are the Writer-Manager Rep Relationship, Short Films Big Heart, Screenwriters Agreements, Script-to-Screen Ghostbusters, and How I Met Your Mother, A Conversation with Carter Bays. Other reminders, always check the website for the most up-to-date panel times and details. Several changes have been made since the program book was printed. Panels in the Victorian balcony can be accessed by the service stairway next to the Brazo Street entrance inside the Driscoll Hotel. We have a new conference venue tomorrow and Saturday. It's the Central Presbyterian Church located on the corner of 8th and Brazo Street. On Saturday, during regular conference hours, we'll be launching our inaugural networking lounge with tables dedicated to streamline specific networking opportunities and connections. Stop by Sumner's Hall at St. David's Church to check it out. Visit the merch table and registration to learn more about some of the panels that will be available to purchase as digital downloads to take home after the conference. We have a handful of different packages that cater to the business of film, television, and independent filmmaking. Please silence all cell phones and remember no photography or recording devices of any kind are permitted during the panels. We'll be opening the panel up for a Q&A at the end, so please save your questions for then. Finally, before we get started, we'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors, Hiscox Insurance, Odell Brewing Company, Hendricks Gin, Lincoln Motor Company, K-View, City of Austin Cultural Arts Division, Texas Commission on the Arts, and a very special thanks to Republic TV for helping us live stream the conference online for viewing pleasure. Can we get a round of applause for them for helping us out? Thank you, thank you, thank you to all of our sponsors. Also, I want to encourage you guys to check out this evening's film since we're getting towards the end of the day. For today, our film recommendations are Pro Gamer, The Cliff, and retrospectives of Happy Gilmore and Friends. Also, if you are attending any of the parties tonight, a shuttle for the Austin Film Commission opening night reception will pick up and drop off at the southeast corner of 6th and Brazos. For you locals, that's right next to Buffalo Billiards on 6th Street. All right, without further ado, James V. Hart.
Are we on? Yes, we are. Before we go too far, where is she? Where is Erin? Did she leave? Okay. Erin Halligan, who has been the conference director for a number of years and has really been a huge supporter of the Hart Chart and getting these sessions together and sort of prodded me and egged me on. This is her last year with the festival. She's leaving us to go, staying in Austin, but she's leaving us to go to a new adventure. And I just want you to stand up so I can applaud you and we can all say thank you. Yeah. The most level-centered conference director you will ever work for in your entire life. So you get lucky enough to do a festival, pay her a lot of money because she's worth it. Thank you. I'm glad we have an intimate setting. I always worry about playing a larger room because this really is a very intimate one-on-one kind of experience as a writer. We write alone in rooms, we write in teams, we cyber chat, but we collaborate. The Hart Chart was started right here in Austin, 1999. I would use these whiteboards and start drawing pictures of people's scripts and narrative. And it came out of a need that I had as a writer to do something besides look at an outline or look at note cards on a wall. I never knew emotionally where I was in the writer's journey, in the character's journey. And it all started on Dracula and Hook. And I've chosen Hook. This is the first time I've done Hook. 25 years. This is the 25th anniversary of Hook. And in all these years, I've never charted it. And maybe I was afraid to, because it really was the beginning of my ride. At the very ripe old age of 44. So what I want to do with this, what I started to do with this tool is that Francis Coppola gave me some keys to structure and character. Now, those of you that are worried about structure, thinking that it makes everything confining and it makes you have to follow a formula, well, I'm wearing Robin Williams tennis shoes today in honor of Robin. Robin was, and I may lose it a couple times in this session. Robin also taught me about structure. Every great comic, every person, he tells a good joke or she tells a good joke, they know structure. It's not, oh, doesn't he have good timing or doesn't she have good timing? It's structure. George Carlin knew structure. All of your buddies that are actors who impress you with their improvisational skills, structure. The best storytellers around the campfire, the best storytellers in the village. The reason they had everybody leaning forward for days and weeks and hours and through storms and hail and earthquakes, structure. They knew how to make the audience lean forward in anticipation of what's going to come next. That structure. I found structure to be liberating instead of confining. So when Mr. Coppola gave me 3 magic questions to answer after we did Dracula, I wish he'd given them to me before, I began to formulate this idea of structure. And we're going to go through the questions, we're going to go through the app. I need to recognize somebody else. I did this for years on the whiteboard. I still need this. Guy Goldstein, who developed Writer's Duet, who's here today. Guy cornered me a year ago after seeing the Dallas Buyers Club, I think, 2 years ago. And then we did Imitation Game last year. He said, I can do this as an app so that you can carry the whiteboard with you. This whole design is about trying to make sure that you have a tool, a diagnostic tool with you that measures where your characters are in their emotional journey through the whole structure. I didn't call it the Hart Chart. Somebody else did. I called it the big picture or cardiac arrest, because this all came from my cardiologist who died of a heart attack. The EKG you take when you get your heart checked, I began to watch this and go, I wonder what my characters' heartbeats are doing in the story as they go through the journey, and could I find a way to measure that? Mr. Coppola gave me 3 questions. We're going to show you where those questions are on the app. Core questions. I don't know how well you can see the screen, but you should be. We go to the core questions. These are questions that I have to answer before I start writing, and actually answering them forces you to write. And they may seem very rudimentary and very simple to you, except that when Mr. Coppola gave them to me, I pay attention to what Mr. Coppola says. So if you think this is Screenwriting 101, I want you to try to answer these questions. The first question is, who are the main characters and what do they want when we meet? So in Hook, what does Robin Williams want? What does Peter Banning want when we meet him? No, not to save his kids. His kids are still there. That's good though. What does he want? He wants to close his big deal. Remember? Peter wants to close his big deal. That's all that matters to him. That's going to change. Now, want comes from material things. I, me. You know, I want to close the big deal. I want the new car. I want the start date. I want to win first prize. I want the girl. I want the guy. I haven't decided what I want. It's all about ego. And that's what drives want. And want is what drives your character through the narrative, trying to get to what they want, which leads them to what they need. Rolling Stones. Anybody at Old Cella? Did anybody go see? You can't always get what you want, but if you try sometime, you just might find. That simple. Second question. What are the characters' relationships like, and what are the obstacles the main characters must encounter to overcome in order to get with them? And you start listing them. Well, the first obstacle that Peter Banning has to encounter is his kids are kidnapped by James Hook. So there's they're an obstacle to closing his big deal. Second obstacle, Peter has forgotten who he is. He's forgotten that he's Peter Pan. He's forgotten his origins. He's forgotten how to fly. He's forgotten how to fight. He's forgotten how to crow. These are all internal things your character needs to address and take hold of in order to get what they want. Neverland is not London, It's he's got to get to Neverland. You start listing all the obstacles and all the relationships that your main character has to encounter to get what they want. Tinkerbell, the Lost Boys, Rufio, Granny Wendy, the fact that his kids, that he doesn't spend time with his kid. And these are things you can make yourself write down when you're setting up your character in your story. Now, I'm cheating here because this is a movie that already exists. So this was originally designed as a rewrite tool. But I'm taking Hook and doing this, not only because it's 25 years old, but because the movie is edited not the way the script was written. The movie was edited in a narrative structure that I wish we could have found in the screenwriting process. Same thing with Dracula. We didn't do any reshoots in Dracula, but we had to go back and shoot pieces of the narrative to make it work. So the whole idea of this app for me and this tool is, can we head off some of those problems before we get to the editing room? Especially if you're doing a short film or you're doing a low-budget film, you don't have the money and time to go back and reshoot, So this is a tool that's designed to help you get it right on the page. Third question, the trick question. In the end, do my main characters get what they want or not get what they want? And is it good or bad for them if they did or did not? ... Did they get what they need? So did Peter get to close his big deal? No. Was that good or bad for him? Good, because he discovered what he needed, which is to rekindle that inner child, to spend time with his kids, to come home and be dad, and to rekindle his imagination and be a human being again. Those three simple questions, if you make yourself answer those questions in the initial state, or as you're in your rewrite, go back and look at your script that you wrote and see if you can get those questions answered and list them. But if you answer these three questions, you will have created a character-driven narrative as opposed to a plot. Your characters will, I like it when the characters pull you through the narrative. Instead of us writers pushing, we tend to, okay, I want this to happen now. I want this to happen now. What do your characters want? What do your characters need? What are your characters telling you? So I'm looking for those narratives that pull me through the narrative story instead of pushing me and shoving me and making me. And you can always tell when that seems very convenient. I guess the writer hadn't quite figured out, I'm just going to make this happen. So once you answer these three questions, you have the basis for a 3-act structure or a 7-act structure or a TV season or a TV episode or a narrative film. And I'm learning now in television that this applies to a whole season. These three questions could have taken a whole season to answer. Bonus questions. As you can see, this is all in the app, and you actually sit there and type the answers into these questions, and they're saved for you. Then I think Guy has just added where you can download them and print them so you've got them. And I do this now every time I write. And I also do it as a measure of how am I doing? Have I figured out what my character needs? So, bonus questions. I'm going to mess around with these. Can we go to why now? Okay. This to me is very important. Why now? Why is this happening now in Peter Banning's life? What makes him a candidate for this adventure? Why not 10 years ago? Why not 20 years in the future? Why not yesterday? Why not last week or a month ago? Why now? And many writers don't have an answer to that question. Why not? Why couldn't it just be any day? Well, there's two things here. One, Granny Wendy is receiving an honor because they're building a wing at Great Ormond Street Hospital in London. That's why. That's why they're going to London. That's why they're going to be in that same nursery where Peter Pan and Wendy and the boys all had their stories. That's why now. Now, if Granny Wendy were dead, I'd have to come up with another reason. Great Ormond Street Hospital is a real place. The Great Ormond Street Hospital had never been singled out the way it was in the film. And it's where J.M. Barrie, we know who J.M. Barrie is, right? Not Walt Disney, J.M. Barrie. It's where J.M. Barrie gave the rights to Peter Pan, and all of the royalties from Peter Pan's characters go to the Great Ormond Street Hospital for children. So we invented that as the reason Peter had to go back to his origin. Without that, I've got no why now. So it really is important you figure out why now. Where are we? We talked about need. Okay, need is internalized. Want is externalized. So need is the same thing as a wound or a flaw, but you can't discover what you need unless your character pursues what they want. Indiana Jones, to be Poppy. What does Indiana Jones want in the good one? Sorry, Stephen and George, I know we're live streaming, but Larry Kasdan, great script. What does Indiana Jones want in the first one? He wants the art, an object, a material thing that he will risk his life to get. What does he need? Ladies, Marion. And at some point in that journey, he is willing to give up that thing which he most coveted and sought after for her. So at some point, your main character jettisons what, and this is all, I'm not making this up. This is the way these films play out for you. It's why we go back and see them over and over again, because we're satisfied. So at some point, your main character has to give up what they want and risk everything because they've discovered what they need. And that's pretty easy to find out in Peter Banning. What he needs is to get in touch with his inner child, to embrace his family, to rekindle his imagination, and to remember what it was like to have a sense of wonder before we turn into adults. So you actually answer the questions. The wound, same thing. A wound is usually something that needs a great deal of healing. Here, wound here, and usually your main character will suppress that. Peter's wound is he's an orphan. He's forgotten his origins. He's turned into an adult. He's let material things take over his life as opposed to love and emotions and caring and his imagination. He has this very deep wound that needs to be reawakened. And I got accused a lot of all of the kind of pop things that were going on with finding your inner child and going on retreats and hitting drums and running around in your loincloth and painting yourself up. I figured the worst thing you could do to Peter Pan was have him grow up. In fact, J.M. Barrie wrote a screenplay that actually had Peter grown up in it. And it was my son's idea when he was 6 years old who asked that question, what if Peter Pan grew up? So the wound here that Peter has to heal is the cost and the price of being a. That's pretty heady stuff. Good guy. See, guys, also he's editing me too. So. Next thing is, what does my main character fear most? And death doesn't. None of us are afraid of, right? None of us are afraid of. So death is not allowed to be your answer. What does Peter fear most? Flying. That's funny. Robin used to say that he has flying dreams and he always loses baggage. But flying represents a liberation. Flying represents a healing. What he fears most is losing the love of his children and having them taken away from him. And James Hook represents that thing he fears most, which is the threat of having all of this being called out on the lie and the cheat and the fraud that you are. And usually when you identify that fear, that is the form your nemesis takes as a character in the story. What character can vapor lock your main character, shut them down emotionally, terrify them, make them stop breathing, make their heart skip a beat, make their heart pity-pat? It can be a romantic character or it can be a nemesis, But in this, to me, Hook represents that fear that finally comes out of his past and takes away from him that which he's forgotten how much he treasured and how precious it was. And here's my favorite. Do we have satisfying ending? Not a happy ending, not a sad ending, not a good ending, not a bad ending. Are we satisfied? Have you satisfied your audience with your ending? Anybody seen a film or TV series lately where they weren't satisfied with the ending? Speak up. What's that? Right? That's artificial. Have you got an example, something that didn't satisfy you? Chef. When we found out he was a cannibal and he ate children. Mm. That would piss me off too. That's good. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am. Lost. Yeah. How many people were pissed off at the ending of Lost? Pam, make sure hey, you get paid a lot of money to write this stuff, so. Lost. What about The Sopranos? See, everybody's like, yes, ma'am. Say again? Oh, Steve Jobs. Yeah, the Ashton Kutcher version of Steve Jobs. Yeah. And you probably can go through a litany of things where you weren't satisfied. Not happy, not sad, because you can be satisfied with a sad ending. You know, we all knew how Bonnie and Clyde ended. I watched it the other night. I mean, whew, what a movie. And you know they're going to die. But because of the emotional ride and because of the character identification you have with those characters, you're satisfied. There was no way they could walk away from that. If they'd gotten them going, we're getting away, I wouldn't have been satisfied. Anybody else, what about something you were satisfied with? Shoot. 7. Ooh, one of my favorite ones to discuss. Why? Kevin Spacey, the serial killer, wins because he makes Brad Pitt kill him. I went nuts at that ending. I wanted to know, what is Morgan Freeman doing in this movie? What is he there in that scene for? He is there in that scene to stop Kevin Spacey from winning. And I met Fincher afterwards. It was a premiere, and I was in a little less self-control in those days. And I knew his girlfriend quite well, and I went up to him and said, "What were you doing with that ending? You let Kevin Spacey win. Morgan Freeman should have killed him and protected." And Fincher looked at me and went, okay. If you look on the DVD, on the English DVD, there is an alternate ending. And he said, "I shot that ending. And Brad Pitt didn't want to be a Trump word, pussy, and not kill Kevin Spacey." So you found a way to be satisfied. I wasn't satisfied, and the director shot it both ways. Anyway, this one's a big one for me. Satisfying. Are we satisfied at the end of Hook? The last line that, sorry, the last line that Robin speaks, "To live will be an awfully big adventure." In the classic J.M. Barrie play, it's always Peter says, "To die will be an awful adventure." And to Mr. Spielberg's credit, that I had some bullshit thing at the end, like, "Yeah, we're going to live every day to the fullest, and we're going to be cool and love each other," and it went on forever, you know. And when the sun comes up tomorrow, we'll be, I'll wear my new clothes and we'll go play. We'll go to the merry-go-round, right, kids? Let's go to the merry-go-round. No, Dad, we're not going to the merry-go-round. And Stephen found a line in J.M. Barrie's play that is an action line. It's an author's note that Barrie writes at the end of the play. And Barrie said, no, the line should be, "To live, And every time I see that, it's such a satisfying place to have arrived. He found Toodles' marbles, He got his happy thoughts back. He got his kids back. He found his imagination. He flew again. So we hope we have a promise there that something's going to be different. Always keep this window open. So if you go through, take your existing rewrite, your existing draft, and you go through and just apply these questions and see what you come up with. What this begins to identify for me is where I'm weak, where I don't know what my character is, where I don't know what my character needs, and it will help you rethink your rewrite. This was a rewrite tool. I now use it. That's why I'm applying it to an existing film. I use it when I break story now. When I'm starting from scratch, I start these questions. And by the time I answer these questions, I've written a treatment, I've written an outline, I've got a narrative that is character driven, and I've never faced a blank page. Some shitty ones, but nothing blank. And I guarantee you, if you buy the app and you face a blank page, guy will give you your money. That was the big one for me, is just, and this is what Coppola was teaching me, just answer the question. Don't tell me you don't know what to write. Answer the goddamn question. So thank you, Francis. It was a great gift. So this became the basis for the chart experience. This is when I began to try to draw pictures of a narrative as opposed to an outline. Oh, and I forgot to give my mate Bob Hoskins a shout out. Good morning, Austin land. We lost Bob in the same year as Robin, and it was a huge blow. These are two very fine men, and if you watch the movie, if you see the film again, just watch Bob Hoskins and watch Robin, and look at those performances, and try to imagine somebody else playing those parts. Robin was always Peter Pan to me, and there was never any other Smee but Bob Hoskins, who both became mates and family friends, and I miss them dearly. Okay, the chart. Now that we've answered the questions, anybody follow Chris Vogler and the writer's journey? And Chris is a buddy, and we spend a lot of time together. And there are certain things that we believe in storytelling are built into the ether of the universe. Can't fuck them. They will come back and bite you. You can mess with them, you can rearrange them, but you can't ignore them. They exist. And every great narrative, even good narratives, even mediocre narratives, have certain signposts and certain things in your storytelling that are absolute. And you can take issue with me if it's nonlinear, doesn't matter. Tarantino is very carefully structured. This is a guy that really works on structure. That wasn't an accident that Pulp Fiction was put together the way, I'll try this. No. Very carefully structured. Structure. Movies are about structure. Poems and haiku, haiku is about structure. Novels, the good ones, like Kurt Vonnegut and some of the classics are very carefully structured. Kurt actually, I didn't realize this, but I've worked with Kurt and we were doing some of his adaptations. He actually drew similar charts for his novel. Go check, it's not just me, go check out Kurt Vonnegut. He has a lot bigger cred than I do. Signposts. Once you've answered the questions, that's your first part of your toolkit, first part of your toolbox. Now we're going to go to these signposts. These are signposts that I've stolen, I've cobbled them together, I've come up with new ones from some of the greats over the years, and then a couple of my own, to give you these pieces to write to, these oases, these places to write to, as opposed to trying to, oh my God, I got to do 110 pages, and how am I going to do it? I'm out of gas on page 30. Okay, the first signpost is set the world. Set the world means what are my main characters doing the day before the movie starts? What world I'm in, what time I'm in. So in Hook, here we go to the chart. In Hook, we have set the world. So the first thing that we do in set the world is we meet the family, we meet the main characters. And we meet them all at a school play of Peter Pan. And what we're going to do is assign a value on the chart to this experience. Is this good? Is this bad? How do we feel about this family? Do we like them? Is there something horrible going on? So I'm going to give this a 40. And again, this is my decision. But the Pan play, is how we meet these characters. And this is positive. So, Guy's going to show you how you use the app as I go through this. Then, while you're setting the world, something's going to happen. It's going to start making you form a decision or feelings or having an opinion about the family. So what happens in the middle of the play? Phone rings. Peter Banning gets a phone call. Okay? Phone. Don't try to read my writing, read his. Now, this is positive, and this seems to be a negative character trait in Peter, that he would actually take the phone call in the middle of his daughter's play. First indication that, oh, you're something is more important than your family and your children. Okay, we're still setting the world. At that point, he makes a promise to Jack that what? He's got a baseball game coming. But this is where we establish this big deal. So then Jack goes to the baseball game, and Peter's going to be there. What happened? Peter misses the game. And Jack loses. Now we've pretty much set the world. We've seen Peter at his office. We've seen him talking about his big deal, and everybody, and we've also established they're going to London to meet Granny Wendy. So we pretty much set the world. Then, now that you set the world, there's going to be a new opportunity that comes into your main character's life. Something that wasn't there the day before or the year before, or a month before. So the new opportunity in the Banning's life is that they are leaving California and they're going to London to meet Granny Wendy. So that's positive. You decide on how good that is. So but this is the first new opportunity you have. So I'm going to give that a couple of pluses to London to meet Wendy. The real Wendy. Now we know the world that Peter Pan's real. And the anticipation we set up is that when is Robin Williams going to figure out who and what and what's going to happen? So we take him to London, and Wendy meets Peter, and she makes the first character assessment for us, the audience. Am I right? She says, "Oh, Peter, you've become a pirate," because she hears about all of his big deals, and so she identifies him that he's become a. So that's a new one. I'm gonna try to bring that down a little bit. So we know that Wendy's on to him, but she also calls him boy, and we meet Toodles, who's lost his marble. We understand there's an orphanage involved in this, but it's real. The next thing that happens, this is a big scene between Peter and Moira, who Caroline Goodall was amazing. Undiscovered, nobody knew who she was. Stephen found her in casting. She did an amazing job of making this mother work. The hardest thing to do in your story is balance. How do we make the mother character, who's not going to be in the movie, how do we make her memorable? So Stephen didn't like the draft that he signed on to because the mother was too weak. And I had written an earlier draft with Nick Castle where the mother was strong, where she was taking issue. You're missing your kid's life. You're missing their childhood. You're not paying attention to them. You're not we're not policemen. They're not under arrest. They're kids. And I begged him to go back and read the draft, and he did, to his credit. And it's interesting. Producers, we have producers here? Just remember that until you get a director on board, it's really the producer's vision and the writer's vision you're dealing with. And then a director comes on board, and it's got to be their vision. Suddenly, Steven Spielberg's on board, and he's got a million ideas, and he wants things differently. So the phone conversation between Myra, it's the second time we've used the phone, notice. Second phone call. Okay? This is their big confrontation where she tells him he is missing his kid's childhood. and they're going to be old and gone and not care about him, and he's missing it. So this is the a missing kids growing up. And what does she do? He throws his phone out the window. Another woman commenting on the character, the male's main character. That's a huge editorial comment. She throws that phone out. So, and now we're into we've got new opportunity, first opportunity. Big opportunity comes after that, where Peter does something good, is that he goes and he dedicates Wendy's wing. And he talks about being an orphan. He talks about what Wendy did for him. He talks about what Wendy did for all these orphans. So we begin to see something about Peter we like. He is capable of having an emotional connection to something. While this is happening, what's going on at the house? Hook shows up and kidnaps the kids. Hook. Hook is back. They come home. Liza, the housekeeper that's been there forever, has been knocked out. Toodles is a mess. He's seen the kids kidnapped. There's a big note that says, "Please come to Neverland at the request of your children." Jazz Hook. So this is pretty bad, wouldn't you say? You can assign it whatever kind of value you want, but this is bad. Now we're getting ready to set up what we call a visible, tangible goal. There are three things that happen. Second opportunity, what happens now that we've set the table? We know what the conflict is. My kids are gone, and James Hook. So the conflict, this is going to drive the rest of the narrative. How does Peter get to Neverland? How does Peter get his kids back? How does Peter defeat captivity? And we're about 17 minutes into the film at this point. No, we're longer than that, 20 minutes. The studio screamed at me that we better be in Neverland by page 10. And I said, one, Mr. Spielberg will decide when we go to Neverland. And two, if you don't set up the world, the real world, the ordinary world that your characters inhabit, and you don't get inside their shoes, you don't care about them, even if you don't have to like them, then you're not remotely interested in going on a journey. You don't. So it's half an hour into the movie before Tinkerbell takes him. So the next opportunity is Tinkerbell shows up. And says, "Hey, you're Peter Pan." He goes, "No, I'm not. I don't believe in fairies." "Yeah, you do." And she knocks him out, and she takes him to Neverland. She kidnaps him from the nursery, and they go off to Neverland. So, and Toodles sort of sets the tone with Peter when he says, "Have to find Maggie, have to find Jack. You have to fight. You have to fight. You have to fight, fly, and crow. Like crow, fly, and fight. Have to find Maggie. Have to find Jack." Hook. So Toodles is now embedded in the process. Now I'm going to show you. Okay. So Peter arrives in Neverland, and the first thing that happens in Neverland is he encounters the pirates. The pirates chase him, and they capture him. They capture Peter in the town, pirate town, with stuffed croc, all that stuff. And again, I knew we were messing with sacred ground here, but where did the pirates go? So they were bored. If you read J.M. Barrie, every time Peter Pan was away from Neverland, the pirates got bored, the Indians fought, they drank a lot, they used all of our sponsors, and Hook finally figured out a way to get revenge. He took his kid. So you see this great intro, and we're not going to do Hook today, but you'll see when we end here how all the characters, you can put all the characters up here. Rufio, Hook, Wendy, you'll see them all up here. But right now we're going to follow Peter. So Hook captures Peter, or he's captured. And then Hook takes him and humiliates him in front of his children. Peter Pan's afraid of heights. Peter Pan can't fly. And then Hook is so disappointed, this can't possibly be Peter Pan. So he humiliates him in front of his kids. Even to the point where Maggie says, "Mommy could do it," and you see the disappointment in the kids, the disappointment in their father, and they don't believe he's Peter Pan either. I want to read you something. These are all the bad reviews. The movie. The critics hated the film. You won't hear Stephen talk about it a lot. It was not a good. It was a very difficult film to make. What I'm telling you is how the film is edited. I've already told you a couple places where the script is different. This is how the film is edited and built. This is what Robin has to say about. I believe childhood is a very precious time, and I don't want to miss it with my children. Because I did miss it with my father, who was off working all the time. He loved me dearly, but I didn't get to see him much, and I missed that. I'm trying not to do the same with my children. A line in the first part of the film strikes home for me where my screen wife, Maura, Caroline Goodall, says, "Don't miss it because it's gone. Children only want to be with you up to a certain point, and they're basically looking at you going, you're an asshole." This is what drew Robin to the story, the character and what the character dilemma was during the story. And here, now his biggest fear, what does he fear most? That he cannot save his children from captivity. He can't fly, he can't fight, he can't crow. He doesn't even believe he's Peter Pan. So then Tinkerbell to the rescue. Tinkerbell comes in. I'll give Tinkerbell pink. Tinkerbell comes in and she negotiates 3 days for a decent pan. Incidentally, I wrote Tinkerbell for Meg Ryan, Julia Roberts. That was I still think a casting. I mean, I know Stephen did a yeoman's job of dealing with Julia, who's wonderful. This was not Tinkerbell. So Tinkerbell gives him the third opportunity, which leads to the visible, tangible goal. 3 days, war between good and evil. I'll give you a decent pan. I'll turn him into Peter Pan in 3 days. Okay. So this is sort of how and then of course Peter gets knocked overboard and the mermaids save him, which we always like. So the mermaids save him. And we know what his visible, tangible goal is. Now we have a ticking clock, as they like to say in our jargon. 3 days. In 3 days, he's got to become Peter Pan. That's our visible, tangible goal. And I think that, and it must be something your audience can actually physically and visually grab onto and go, that's where we're going. Okay. So now the next part of the narrative. This is usually what I would call ends Act 1. And you try to end on a rising action. Even though Peter's been knocked in the ocean, his kids are tied up, we now have a visible, tangible goal. He now has to make progress in order to achieve what? Fly, fight, crow, and to defeat Captain Hook. That's what's driving our narrative. So what I try to do here is give you a break where on the chart you actually know that this is a rising action. You know, if you keep your audience depressed too long, this is going to tell you. And if we put Hook up here and we put Tink up here, you'd see very much different, very different kind of climb. You know, Captain Hook is disappointed it's not Pan. He's depressed. You know, he's not happy. Okay? And this leads us to Act 2, where we're going to see how depressed and how unhappy Captain Hook. So the Act 2 opens up. If I were doing Hook, Hook is suicidal. No little children love him. He's captured who he thought was Peter Pan's kids. It's not Peter Pan. Or if it is Peter Pan, he's a schlub. You know, he's not even worth fighting. So his life is over. And this was a very controversial scene when we first wrote it. Are we going to show, are we going to have a moment where there's a potential suicide by a main character in a children's kind of story? We realize we're doing this for adults. And Bob Hoskins is actually wonderful in this scene if you watch him. So Hook is suicidal. Hook's going to kill himself, you know. And Bob Hoskins completely turns Hook around when he has an apostrophe. Piffy what? And this was Bob. And I got to credit somebody else. Malia Scotch Marmo. Malia was the writer that came in at Dustin's request, who did amazing work throughout during the production. And Malia worked really carefully, closely with Dustin. So this is where you see the brilliance of Bob Hoskins. He completely turns it around, and he gives Hook a very positive plan. Make Pan's kids okay? And suddenly, James Hook happens. He'll fly, he'll fight, he'll crow, and then he'll. Peter is now in the Peter shows up and is captured by the Lost Boys. Okay, so the Lost Boys capture him. Rufio, my favorite. Dante was here about 3 years ago. We did Pan. We screened it here. Dante's still Rufio. He's 42 years old, and he is the one iconic character that I actually created that had nothing to do with J.M. Barrie. And he's been doing screenings around the country with 25th. He's a wonderful, wonderful young man, very generous. But Rufio convinces everybody that he's not Peter Pan. And then Tinkerbell jerks him up and says, come on, give him a chance. And if you remember Isaiah, oh, there you are, Peter. That is a completely Spielberg moment. He found that because Robin's face was so rubbery, and it's still a wonderful moment. So Peter's inside there somewhere. Remember? Inside, need, want, need. They know that he's in there somewhere, and their job is to get him out. So your job as a screenwriter should make the interior, exterior. Whatever your characters are bearing and keeping secrets, your job is to mine it and bring it out so that it's visible and tangible. And one of the best, just that single moment, if it weren't even my film, I would try to find an example like that to show you what people see inside you, your character that you're trying to bring out. So Peter starts on his training. Peter's going to train. He's got 3 days. This is all progress and setback. Your second act is made up of progress and setbacks, little victories, little defeats, little victories, little defeats, little climbs, little drops. So you're going to see this is where the roller coaster begins. This is where the roller coaster begins. So he starts his training, and he fails miserably. You know, he fails the training. He plotzes into trying to fly. They shoot him out of the slingshot, and he can't fly. You know, and Hook is having his "Why Your Parents Hate You" classroom scene. This is good for Hook. Hate parents. And it's again, Bob and Dustin just diabolic scene. Flunk the Maggie. And it's also where Maggie says to Jack, Neverland makes you forget, which is what Peter's done. Never forget, run home, Jack, run home, Jack. And then Maggie's taken out of the narrative. She's gone. So Hook now has Jack in his clutches. Peter's failing, Hook is succeeding. So you begin to see how the chart can show you where what's good for one character is bad for another character, where the journeys are actually, you see where they come in conflict, where they intersect, how they drive each other apart. One's doing good, one's doing bad. That's what the chart began to show me, exactly what my other characters were going through in the narrative. I would bring Peter's training down a little bit more, guy. Why? So we can bring him back up. See, if you're an author of a book, you're God. If you're a screenwriter or a television writer in this business, the audience. Let me talk about the audience for a little bit. These are my new questions we're going to add. I just got into this whole audience thing about 2 years ago because too often we ignore the audience. We forget that they're the ones that decide whether we're right or wrong, not us, not even the director. You're there rolling the dice until that movie goes out the door and you see what happens. Audience. The audience is what made on-demand binge watching successful. It was the audience, not the genius of Netflix doing House of Cards, which Bo Willimon, you'll see him, who's brilliant. That could have fallen flat on his face. We don't want to watch things on the weekend. We got stuff to do. We got to drink beer and drive pickups and go fishing and follow Donald Trump. The audience is God. So I'm going to give you these questions real quick that are not on there. This is about the audience. And I now ask myself this about every 20 pages. What does my audience know? When do they find out? How do they find out? What do they do with that information? And do they like it or not like it? Are they satisfied or unsatisfied? You don't have to have a satisfied audience every step of the way, but you need to be measuring. Am I addressing, am I confusing them? Am I pissing them off? It's just pay attention to that audience and sitting behind you when you're writing. Because often we assume, oh, well, it's on the page or my audience already knows this. And I've been learning that you can't assume your audience. They may be ahead of you or they may be behind you, but you want them with you. You want them to be going, what the fuck? As opposed to what? You want them with you instead of not with you. So I've started doing this. So to me, I now have the audience as part of my mental chart. What am I doing to my audience? Okay? Peter fails. All right? So now we get to my favorite part, which is Cinderella moment. Cinderella moment was born here at the Austin Film Festival during the writers workshop. Anybody have any clue what a Cinderella moment might be? Make up your own definition. Joe, I'm putting you on the spot. Joe is one of my I mean, I didn't know this. We've been on the plane yesterday. He's been using the Hart Chart now since it came out with it. And he was in the second round with both scripts. And you owe it all to... No, the chart. No. Here's your $20. I forgot. Yeah, you doubled in price. Cinderella moment. There's someone back there. That's an interesting way of looking at it. Yes, sir. Almost, but you're on the right track. Fairy godmother? No, loses is not Cinderella, and loses is bad. Loses, plan falls apart. Yes, sir, in the back. Say again? That's good. The moment the hero first thinks he or she can succeed. All right, this is good. Cinderella moment for me is a moment you need to give your audience and your character where you give them a little bliss hit. You give them a little pat on the back. You give them a little pixie dust. You encourage them to think they can do it. So in Cinderella, it's not when she gets to the ball. It's not when she's turning heads and pissed off the step bitches and her fairy god bitch. Her stepmom bitch. It's when she sees herself in the mirror after the fairy godmother has dressed her up and she sees who she used to be or what she can. And she sees what she's been struggling and she's earned. Cinderella moment is usually a moment, a little bliss hit that your main characters have earned. So for me, the Cinderella moment, and I love this whole section of Hook. I use it as a teaching tool. Never food. The never food. When he finally starts to use his imagination. He's hurting, he's tired, he's been strung out, he's failed at everything. Rufio's humiliated him, he can't fly, he can't do anything. And there's a reason for it, because he hasn't kicked into his imagination. So the never food, if you remember the scene, they're all at the table and they open up the pots and there's nothing in them, just steam. And all the kids are eating And they're making comments and they're blowing on, hey, this is good. Can I have that? Oh, this is good. And Peter's just watching him going, Gandhi ate more than this, I think. And that's Robin. Nobody wrote that line. That's Robin. And so it is the beginning. It's that little pat on the back, encouraging Peter. Use your imagination. You can't be Peter Pan if you don't use your imagination. And this leads you to what I call the top of the mountain. Cinderella moment is usually a bliss hit that's going to give you a breakthrough for your main character. In Cinderella, she goes to the ball, but the movie's not over. In Peter Pan and in Hook, he opens up his imagination, he sees the food, and he actually starts the food. And it's the name calling kind. Prison barber, nearsighted gynecologist, stupid man, tree bag of shoe, chewed food. It's all this stuff that we started the insults. And that act of sort of anarchy and total kiddom frees him. Even to the point where the last thing he used was a high school insult. I grew up in Fort Worth, so we had these insult contests in the science lab. And there was always vorticella tongue, paramecium jaw, paramecium brain, weasel womb, turtle tits. We would have biological insults. And Robin fell in love with paramecium brain. And he did that whole thing about, I'll tell you what a paramecium brain is. It's a one-cell animal that can't fly. So that frees his imagination. It also brings Rufio down. Rufio throws the coconut at him. Peter grabs the sword, cuts through the coconut, and realizes that something's happened. And he actually hears the echo of the crow in the back. And he drops the sword, and all the kids look up at him and go, he has opened up portal. Top of the mountain for me, I like to call it as good as it gets. Because everything else after that, good or bad, is going to be trying to pull you down from that moment. Okay? So top of the mountain is the triggering of his imagination and opening up the portal to becoming Peter Pan. Now we have Cinderella moment number 2. I cheated on you there, dude. I'm sorry. See what you can do? See how you can change the signposts and rearrange them any way you want. You can rename the signposts. You can give them your own names. So this is just what I use. This doesn't mean you're rigidly stuck to it. So Cinderella moment number 2 comes after top of the mountain. Now, it wasn't written this way. If you go back and watch the movie, in the food fight scene, Peter's wearing a smock and he gets covered. The next time you see him, he's in a tuxedo. And he's talking to Thudbutt, the big round chunky who was 9 years old. And they're talking about Toodles' marbles and his happiness. And it confirms that Toodles really did lose his marble. And it's a wonderful moment where Thud says to him, you can find your happy thoughts. Mine's my mother. That was not, that took place in the script way before the food. It doesn't belong in the narrative. So now it's Cinderella moment number 2, where Thud gives Peter back his happy thought. He gives him back the apples, which again opens another place in Peter that makes him more accessible to becoming Peter Pan. But it wasn't written that way. There were 5 writers working around the clock on the script, and I was faxing stuff on Sunday nights into Stephen. It was amazing. The biggest problem with his that he had to face on the film was a release date. He backed himself into a release date. Stephen never had the time with the script he needed before he had to go into production. That was the biggest problem here, is having enough time to settle the script the way you wanted as a director. Then there is also a Cinderella moment in that same breath where we do Goodnight Neverland. And it's where all the Lost Boys are kind of chilling, everybody's going to bed, and Goodnight Neverland. And there's a nice kind of settling there. It's a very, really beautiful moment, and to John Napier's credit, the designer, it's one of my favorite moments. It goes from Smee saying, good morning, Neverland, good night, Neverland. Now we're setting up the point of no return. Okay, people, you've heard point of no return before. A lot of different script gurus and stuff use it. Somebody give me a definition of point of no return. Yes, ma'am. Can't go back. You can't go back. Anybody else have a better definition than that? I don't think so. Yes, sir. The hero is committed to the goal. You can't undo that. Anybody else? Okay. It's irrevocable. Cannot be undone. Cannot be undone. You can't go back to the beginning and go, okay, we're starting over. I was kidding. I'm really am Peter Pan, and I know how to sword fight, I know how to fly. Just, and too many films, I think, put pressure on your heroes to already be equipped when they show up, to letting them find their way. Point of no return here is when Hook takes Jack to the clock. I'm going to give Hook a tip up here. When Hook takes Jack to the clock museum, I'm going to bring Hook up here. Oh, wait, gotta turn my board around. Oh my God. Here we go. I'm sitting here doing all this, and I forgot that I had my board here. Oh, so we did all this. You saw all this. You saw the Cinderella moment. You saw all this. We did all this. And now we're at the point of no return. So we have the clock tower. This is why we have an app. Now we have the clock museum where Hook gets Jack to renounce his father. Where he gets him, the easiest thing in the world to do is to be bad. And that's what Hook gets Jack. Smashes clock, smashes his father's watch that his father gave him. Has him say things, he wouldn't let me blow bubbles in my chocolate milk. And Hook does the most diabolical thing, is to hold up the baseball, Jack, and say, I would never miss your father. The baseball game is the point of no return. It's where Peter goes to the baseball game. Peter goes to the baseball game to steal Hook's hook. Jack hits a home run. And you see Hook and Peter right there vying. Peter's watching him lose his son. Jack is carried around. He hits the curveball. The game his father missed. He now attends in Neverland, and Jack hits the curveball under Hook's auspices. And Jack is carried around on the arms of all the pirates. And he hears him say, my Jack. And Peter's had it. He's done. You can't undo that moment. It's irrevocable. And you see the run home Jack, home run Jack, home run Jack. All those things that Stephen built into the baseball game. I was not allowed to write the baseball game on the first script with the other producers who didn't have the money. That's what happened to somebody like Spielberg comes along. Suddenly all those ideas can come up. And if you watch the film at some point, Bob Hoskins is brilliant. Bob Hoskins didn't have a clue anything about baseball. And he's brilliant in the scene. And it is that for a father to see his son succeed, it's like having your child go with the step-parents, and the step-parents are cooler than you are. Is a powerful moment. And Robin is so good in the moment. He throws his hat down. He stalks off. The Lost Boys are disappointed. Which is also the plan falls apart or the shit hits the fan. Baseball game's a point of no return. The home run is the shit hits the fan. Peter has lost his son. So you see all this down here? Something bad has just happened. And it's what I call all is lost, shit hits the fan. If you're Irish, it's shite all over the gaff. We're fucked. We just pulled the rug out from under everybody. It's the worst possible conclusion for your main character. Peter's beat. And that ends Act 2. How are we doing on time? Where am I? Oh my God, it's 5 o'clock. Okay, we can do it. All right, okay. This ends Act 2. And I'm saying Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3, but really, if you notice the signpost, it gives you like 10 acts, 12 acts, 8 acts. And the whole idea of designing Act 2 this way, because it used to be the great desert. You'd say, oh God, I'm in Act 2. I got to write 60 pages. I don't know what I'm going to do. Now you get to write to these places where you can water, get a little injection, have some of the Chloe and the single malt Hendrix. I'm wondering if they're ever going to have, controlled substances for medicinal use on sponsors, or just controlled substances for any use. But so this gives you a way of achieving your goal to keep your audience leaning forward, wanting to know what's going on. And I'm not having to write from the beginning of Act 1. I just got to write to the next signpost and then know what the next signpost is. Consequence, the decision, consequence, decision, consequence, decision. So now we've reached, he's lost his son. Done. Movie's not over. Act 3. We're there. Now I get to turn my board around again. Can you turn the app around? Okay. Act 3. Whoa. Act 3, there's what I call a resurrection opportunity. And you'll find it in a lot of narratives, most good narratives. Something comes along. Who said the glass slipper? Who was that said the glass? Okay. Something comes along that's going to help your main character get up off their ass, pick themselves back up, and try to get to their goal. But it doesn't necessarily come from them. It's not because I'm strong, I'm a hero, I'm now Peter Pan, I can do it. It usually comes from some outside source, a third-party character, somebody that planted earlier. In the case of Cinderella, the resurrection opportunity is the slipper that she dropped at the ball, the prince, and goes, whoever fits this slipper, she had nothing to do with that. All she did was lose it. So she had nothing to do with her happy ending. He did. So in Act 3, Peter goes back. He can't fly. He jumps off the thing. He can't fly. And then Jack's ball that he hit the home run strikes Peter in the head and knocks some sense into him. He sees young Pan in the water when he picks up the ball. Then he sees his shadow. And his shadow leads him to the Never Tree hideout, where he spent his youth as Peter. So something his son did actually resurrected. The gift of hitting the home run that destroyed him was also the solution to became the solution to his. So then we come to Cinderella moment number 3. And that's the trip to into the hideout where he discovers his past. He discovers his happy thought. And he flies. And it all ends on the complete moment where he comes back down to the Lost Boys, and he can play, he can fly, he can fight, he can throw, and Rufio returns the Pan sword. And all of this comes from the baseball game, where he lost everything. Now he flies. Movie's not over. Movie's not over. Where his kids are still in Hook's control. So Tink gets big. Now, Tink getting big, if I'm plotting Tink, is good for her, but it turns bad. So Tink gets big. She actually tempts for a moment. So she's expressing all of her love for Peter. She always had. I don't know if you know Tink's history, but she was supposed to be Queen of the Fairies. Queen Mab banished her because she refused to be Queen of the Fairies. She wanted to hang out with Peter. So she was banished from being Queen Mab, successor, because she wanted to hang out with Peter Pan. So Tink getting big is a challenge to Peter. It's a little bit of a, and when I wrote it, it was more like Casablanca than the teenage scene that ended up in the film. it was really more of a moment between Peter and Tink when he really saw her as this real possible threat to him going back, stay in Neverland. You know, I've always wanted to be big for you, and it's one scene I'm not terribly happy with. One, I think, because Robin and Julia were having problems with the tone then, but I knew that Stephen was what he was going for. He wanted there to be that moment where Peter says, "No, I'm here to save my kids," but it's Tink that reminds him of it. She says, when they kiss, and he says more, and he says Moira. So for me, it was a very pivotal scene, and it results in him saying, "I have a plan." So then we go to conflict resolution, and I'm going to call this the battle between Hook and Pan for good and evil. I mean, this is Hook versus Pan, and regardless of how many scenes there are, how you write it. We had such a good time shooting all this. My son Jake was a fighting lost boy, and he got to fight the pirates and train and everything, And regardless of how big a set piece it is, it's all about one thing: Hook versus. And it comes down to that moment where I forgot. Wow, Rufio dies. Sorry. In this, Rufio dies, which is a real important moment in this whole sequence. Stephen took that scene out script several times. He had Lost Boys shooting tomatoes and shining lights and stuff on pirates, which is not exactly lethal. And I know I was working on Dracula at the time on the same lot. It's interesting. There were Dracula carts and Hook carts. Pretty heady time for me. Driving around, and one day the Hook cart ran into a Dracula cart. They had a collision. So I did that. I wrote that. So it was very controversial. Stephen was very concerned about killing Rufio, and it was always in my original script. Looky, looky, I got hooked. And the line, some of you will appreciate this. The line where Rufio says to Peter, "I wish I had a dad just like you," came from my father, who some of my friends here knew very well. My father had taken a young man under his wing during high school whose father was an alcoholic, abusive, and my dad was very close with this young man. He committed suicide. But he told my dad at all-night party one night, "I wish I had a dad just like you." So Malia found that truth in between the two of them. But Stephen wasn't going to shoot it. Finally, I got a memo when I was working on Dracula. They're going to shoot Rufio's death. So something triggered. If you look at the film, it's not really. It's an incredible moment, but it never really pays off. It doesn't really impact the rest of the story. You don't see any grieving. You don't see any. The Lost Boys are not sorry. So it's almost like it was inserted in there because it was important. And it made Neverland dangerous. If you don't believe Peter Banning can die, risking his life for his kids, if you're just going to get hit with tomatoes, then where's the stake? Where's the jeopardy? What's really at stake? So that became the measure of you can die in Neverland. So Rufio dying was and Dante, held his own with Dustin and Robin. He was 15 years old acting in this. And this is when we had the conflict resolution, when Peter beats Hook and the croc gets to eat him. So that's the conflict resolution. And usually before the end of your film, before the end of your story, you want to start wrapping up all these little loose ends. What happened to Hook? What happened to the Lost Boys? And the other Cinderella moment that comes after that is when Peter gives the sword to Thud. This is a Cinderella moment. He gives the sword to Thudbutt and leaves him in charge. Neverland, because he's going home. So he says goodbye, which is bad for the kids. He says goodbye. It's a sad moment because part of us wants him to stay there. Part of him wants to stay there. but now he's grown to a place where he now can go back to his real world and be a different person. But there is that tug there, you know, and the kids are amazing in the scene. So he says goodbye, and then there's the last, and we're getting to the satisfying ending. Then we're done, and it's almost another Cinderella moment for me. Peter gets back to the statue. He wakes up and he's back in the real world. He's at this Peter Pan statue, which is in Kensington Gardens. My family and I have made many journeys there to thank. And it's the last time we see Robin Williams and Bob Hoskins together, just the two of them on screen. And Bob does an amazing job. He looks like Smee, and that was the whole point of it. Dream, what is it? And Peter realizes he's back, except that Tinkerbell shows up, says, so we have another tug at Peter. This is where I'll always be, Peter. There's another tug at him about what he's letting go of. And finally, we get to the end, guys, you know, and he comes back to the window. To Live, I'm going to call it To Live, will be an awfully big adventure. He comes back, he gives Toodles back his marble, he completes that subplot. Wendy still calls him boy, but sees that he's changed. He tells his son to always leave the window open instead of closing it off. This came from my hatred for the end of, you're going to hate me for this, my hatred and loathing for the end of The Wizard of Oz, which basically says, if it's not in my backyard, it's not worth anything. Stay home, be safe, don't go, you know. Telling kids, don't explore, don't question, don't challenge, don't reach outside the fence, don't go over the hill, don't seek, don't pursue. And it's a dream. Oh, you were in my dream. Oh, it's a dream. Oh, so no. That's not the original books. Oz is a real place, and it wasn't a fucking dream. And I would never ever tell my kids, don't seek, don't explore, don't reach outside the box, don't, never. And they haven't. My daughter has her first film out that she's directed, Miss Stevens, if some of you have seen it, with Lily Ray. My son has a short film that's winning a lot of festivals. He's almost my co-writer. I'm now following my kids' footsteps. I'm hoping my son-in-law produced La La Land, so there's, but this is that last moment we talked about where Stephen found the best last line for the satisfying, which is to live, Guy, let's put up the full chart. Anyway, let's go back and see the beginning. Let's go back and see the beginning and just scroll through it. This is just following Peter, okay? I like the mountains. This is just following Peter. And you can add things in like tension lines, you can draw, you can put in media. You'll see in here we have video clips from the film. The internet's not fast enough to play them. You can add artwork. You can put storyboards. You can use media. You can even cut and paste your script into it. Down here, you'll see that every single signpost. Click up there. Yeah, you actually get to go in and identify the signpost. So you're giving yourself a clue. You're giving yourself notes about what this scene means. That appears down here in a corresponding position. So you almost have a text document. You do have a text document as well as your chart. So you can add to these. You can add details. You can add points on the graph. But let's go back and look at from the beginning and just scroll through it. Then we'll put up the whole thing. Visible, tangible goal. Rufio convinces the suicide. Progress, setback. Cinderella moment. Top of the mountain. Cinderella moment. Point of no return. Plan falls apart. Resurrection opportunity. Cinderella moment. Conflict resolution. Satisfying ending. No chart is the same. And just because those signposts are there, just because your characters go through a journey, the journeys are always different. And that's your job. This is not I got some criticism of, writers write scripts. Yeah, that's the whole point. This is just an analytical tool that helps you diagnose what you're doing to your characters and to your audience, and also what your characters are going through. let's put the full chart up. And I asked the guy to do this when we were developing it. And well, there you see a video clip. Let's put the original chart, the original hook chart up, if you can. With all the characters. It would be no, it's the original one. There you go. That's it. That's it. There you go. This has got. Now you'll see this when it loads. This has all the characters in it as it loads. Loading your chart. Oh, also it saves everything. Every revision you make is saved. Every revision you make is saved up in the Neverland. So you can always go back to the previous. It saves everything. That doesn't look like that. Oh, you just got to add there it is, okay. And what I like to do here is once I get the chart completed, I will put music on and hit animate. And you see the chart come alive, and you see your characters, what they go through. So now we're flying, now we're alive. That's your screenplay. It's not just words on a page, it's a living, breathing document. Ooh, boom. Now are all the characters in? It looks like you only got 2 characters in there. Are they all dialed in? Rufio's not in. Is he in? Anyway, any questions? Yes, sir. Good question. Again, like I had him move a point because I thought it would need to be more severe. Sometimes when you're writing, you'll see 3 or 4 scenes together which don't really take you anywhere, or are kind of what I call shoe leather, or don't use the word montage. Let the French own that. We don't do montages. You may see that you're flatlining, that you really haven't done something in a while to advance your character. The chart will tell you that. I mean, especially if you send a value. They go to the grocery store, they buy chocolate milk, they get gas, they go to the car wash, and then the alien invasion happens. So you may find that you have too many scenes that are not really advancing your character, or provoking your audience, or challenging your audience, because you'll give them a value. Well, how valuable is a car wash more important than the grocery store? Only if the kid turns the car on and drives the car out of the car wash, you have to chase your 5-year-old driving the car. So it begins to show you where you are lacking in anticipation and consequence, and what the price is, and what your character, especially if you decided, okay, I got to get to Neverland. So if I spend the first 30 minutes of Peter in a boardroom, I'm fucked. So is your audience. So is your screenplay. So it literally is a barometer that shows you, okay, I need to make this more important, or I need a scene here which heightens the conflict. That's where the phone scene came with Myra in the once they're in Wendy's. We need it when she throws it out the window. That phone became a symbol of what's wrong with Peter, and if we had done that scene without her throwing the phone out the window, it would have been okay. They argued. They had a fight. But now the phone being thrown out the window is a image system, because he digs it up when he comes back, and he throws it out. So it begins to reveal to you where you can make something more powerful, or make something more important, or give it a higher value and degree of difficulty. And also if it's too easy. If you're cruising along and nothing's hard, your audience is going to go to sleep. Yes, sir. In the J.M. Barrie play, not the in the play, Peter and Wendy, not the musical, not the Jerome Robbins musical, but in the play, the very end, there is in the author's kind of notes and scene directions, and stuff. He says the line is "To live will be an offer." J.M. Barrie. That was a note in the play. It's not spoken by any character. It's Barrie writing it. It's a good one. Yes, ma'am. So I'm gonna repeat it so that they can hear it. Say it again. How does the protagonist? Yes, yes, conflict. Are there certain markers you look for the protagonist in order to advance the journey? Conflict. Conflict is the primary driver of all narrative. So the signpost, and usually what I do is I plot the protagonist first. And we're using terms I don't use. There's more than a protagonist and antagonist. There's like 5, 6 different characters. But for the purpose of this, protagonist is Peter. So I usually plot my protagonist first, my main character. I take them through their journey, and then I make notations of who's in the scenes with them and who's not in the scenes with them. And you can do that. You can add dots. You can add colors to it. You can show who's in the scene with Peter and Wendy. How many of the kids are there? You can do that and begin to see how you populate the scene. Do the protagonist first. Take them through their journey and see what they do. And then you go back and find out who's doing it to them and who's in the way. When do they meet that person? How long does that person drop out of the narrative? You see where Hook doesn't even show up. His presence is felt, but he doesn't show up until Act 2. Well, yeah, bottom of Act 2, he finally shows up. Rufio shows up and dies. And it shows you how long those. Look where Tinkerbell shows up, end of Act 1, or right towards the end of Act 1. They're main characters. So the whole rule of you got to introduce everybody in Act 1, you don't. You have to tell the story with the audience in mind on what they're anticipating, not what some rule book tells you. And that's this is not rules. This is a toolkit. This is help you with craft and help you figure it out. You still have to write it, but I would do the protagonist first. Yes, ma'am. Yes, the audience needs to be with you. I did say that. I admit it. Ah, how do you know the audience will be in the same spot that you wish them to be when they see it? You don't. But if you're aware, like as I said, what does the audience know? In the first scene, in the very first scene of Hook, what does the audience know? Family at a play, it's Peter Pan, the daughter's playing Wendy, there's Peter Banning, so we already know that in this world we've legitimized the fact that there is a Peter Pan play. We're not ignoring that. So we're saying to the audience, this is real. There already is a play of Peter Pan, so it's real. You don't know, but if you totally disregard them, if you totally disregard your audience and just say I don't give a shit about the audience, this is going to be what I want to do, then I think you will be in trouble. But how do you want the audience to feel at the end of it? How I wanted them to feel was for parents. I wanted parents to go, listen to your kids, listen to yourself, don't kill your imagination, stop being an asshole, stop pursuing material things, and don't forget to live. That last line is it for me. You got to live. You can't just not live. And that was what I wanted. That was my satisfying ending, was to have arrived back at that nursery window as a grown up and go, I still believe. Still believe I. So you don't know, but if you're aware of them, if they're looking over your shoulder, you're going to pay attention. Yes, sir. No, in TV, each one of these signposts might be an episode in a season. We've now looking at the signpost as a whole season. You know, and usually an episode will end with a point of no return, or a season will end with a disaster. You know, if you want to keep going, or a point of no return. And even episodes will not necessarily have a satisfying ending because you don't want them to have a satisfying. You want to be satisfied as where you're landing, but it doesn't have to be. It's usually tune in next. Previously on, that's my favorite. Previously on Westworld, didn't we just see that last week? So we're experimenting with it for television now. I have a writer's room in Italy that we're experimenting on a season. The same thing we're doing on Player Piano, the Kurt Vonnegut. We're looking at the signposts for a whole season. Really been helpful because then you think a top of the mountain is mid-season. You either want a bottom of the mountain in mid-season or a top, depending on what you want your viewers. But it's. I think it has applications enormous. Just now beginning to investigate. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am. Well, how do you get the questions to start to turn into the equation for how to plot it on the signposts? If you if okay, what does Peter Pan want? He wants to close his big deal. So suddenly the big deal is now part of what your narrative has to address. Um, uh, the fact that he is going to see Granny Wendy means that he's got some connection to the story. So now I got to get him from the big deal to Granny Wendy. So then you begin to find it. That's when you begin to explore your character. So it doesn't do it for you. You got to. This is a serious writer's tool. This is not a plug and play. This is a serious writer's tool. You answer the questions. It will begin to describe your narrative, and scenes will come to you. When you do your list of obstacles, scenes will begin to come. And sequences, not just scenes, but sequences. How do I get? Okay, I'm going to get Peter to Neverland. What? He can't just rescue the kids at the top of Act Two. I got all these obstacles. Can't fly. Can't. So you begin to invent ways to dramatize the answers to those questions. Good question. And again, I want to impress upon you. This is a tool. This is not a paint by number deal. And I got a lot of criticism. Some people said, we should just write. Yeah, you should just write. This saved my ass. I use this every day in my. And when you have 4 or 5 projects in your head, or when you have 4 or 5 projects you're working on, this is a good way of capturing lightning in a bottle, so it's always there. Go back to it. Hey, lightning. But if you think you're going to remember it tomorrow, the next day, and you don't put it in the bottle, it's not going to be there. Yes, sir. Jumpstart. Exactly. The 3 questions are the jump starter. That's what forces you to begin to make decisions about your character. The bonus questions are more fine tuning and revealing more about what you know and what you don't know about your. If you don't know what your character needs, you might discover it answering the question. Yes, ma'am. Exactly. Well, I have 2 playwrights, an Irish playwright who did our workshops in Europe, and they were having trouble with the play. He took the signpost and the chart back to the actors. They improvised based on questions in the signpost and rewrote the play and got great reviews. And I have 2 actors in London who are now using it when they read a script to have it speak to them about, okay, this now, because it lets them know emotionally where they think they should. The vertical what? Okay. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Just don't tell your director you've got it in your back pocket. Directors like it. The 3 directors I've worked with that use it like it because it's visual. They can look, oh, yeah, now I know pace-wise where I need to be. The last thing I will say is there were 9,100, I don't know if you were there this morning, 9,100 submissions of screen. 9,100. And there were 4,500 films. And there's a lot of talk about celebrating the writer of this festival is, but I want to add another hyphenate to your description. You're not just a writer, you're a writer/job. And what I've learned over the past few years is we are job. Every time we have the courage to sit down and write, and every time you have the courage to type the end, you are creating potential jobs for hundreds. So, and I learned this from Frank Pearson years ago, who patted me on the back and said, kid, when you're feeling depressed, just remember nobody has a job, no director, no actor, no, until you type the end. And I went, oh, thank you. Great, now I can drink some more. And then 2 years ago, my last feature film, Epic, came out, a big animation thing. Epic, I don't know why they called it, did. 15 years of Bill Joyce and I's life in that film. The last credit, the last thing you see on the screen, the 20th Century Fox's credit, says over 12,000 jobs created in the making of this motion picture. Over 1 million work hours were expended in the making and distribution of this motion picture. And then it named the 50 babies that were born during the making of the motion picture. And I realized that had Bill Joyce and I not gotten heavily libated as grown men and chased fireflies around his backyard in Louisiana, sat down and wrote Epic, that never would have happened. Hook and Dracula filled up the Sony lot for 2 years. Thousands of jobs were created that I wrote. And I don't mean I. Malia Scotch-Marmo, Francis Coppola, Steven Spielberg, Tom Stoppard. There were Carrie Fisher, who came in and did some work on Tinkerbell. I mean, it wasn't just me. But at some point, my kid asking me a question, what if Peter Pan grew up, led to all those jobs. And at some point, my fascination with blood dependency and vampires led to all the jobs. So you're not just a lonely writer sitting in a room struggling to type the end. You're a job. So it's not too late for us to run for president. They maybe could use a candidate. But I do want to thank you. And thank you. This is the 25th. I've never done Hook. This is the 25th anniversary. Really appreciate your attention. And we have, listen, look, we're even offering cookies. You get a Hart Chart cookie. Homemade. Go to our booth. Go to Guy's booth. Check it out. We've got special rates for the app during the festival. And man, these are good. There's plenty of stuff. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. I wrote my first